I think that's the broader issue here, that you can't expect to have a conservative government unless you're out fighting for conservative ideas in the 4.5 years between elections.
Welcome back to the arena. I'm Michael Corrin. Now, Mark Steyn doesn't need much of an introduction. He's one of North America's best-known conservative and libertarian voices. The author of numerous books. His latest is The Undocumented. Mark Steyn probably means he should be deported. He joins us now from New York. So, Mark, what's in the book?
There's everything in the book. It's like all the big doom and gloom stuff I normally do about demography and Islam and war and civilizational collapse. But just to lighten the burden of civilizational collapse, I talk about a lot of other stuff in there, including Viagra and cappuccino and Marilyn Monroe and Martha Stewart Christmas decorations. So I like to think that it's a kind of mixed bag for Christmas Day. If you pick one of the lighter items, you'll be chuckling under the Christmas tree. If you pick one of the gloomier ones, you'll probably be grabbing the long strand of tinsel and attempting to hang yourself from the mistletoe by it.
Wonderful stuff. Well, I mean, as eager as I am to discuss Viagra or Marilyn Monroe, let's talk about the pessimistic, not the pessimistic, the realistic approach to life. Because there are times when you look around and between Ebola and Islamic fundamentalism and so on, it does seem a bit gloomy. Let's speak about this issue of Islam, because it's not about disrespecting an alternative religion. It's about our right to speak up, to be free, to criticize, to condemn, to critique. And it's very interesting that there's something that we haven't seen, I believe, since the rise of fascism. We have now an ideology, and that's what Islamism is, looking back. It's rejecting the idea of progress. I mean, even communism, I think, to a large degree, accepted progress. But Islamism says, right, oh, no, we've got to go back to an age that never was, but we think existed somehow in the 8th or 9th century.
Yes, and I write about Islam from a couple of different perspectives in the book. One is the free speech aspect, and then the other is the kind of minor cultural stuff, not the chopping off the heads, but just things like the famous Toronto mosqueteria, where the school cafeteria is turned into a mosque every Friday, and the boys sit in front of the girls, and the girls have to enter by the rear door, and the menstruating girls sit right at the back. But I also write about it in the broader sense. There's a chapter in there talking about cities like Alexandria in Egypt, which at the time Lawrence Durrell wrote his famous book, The Alexandria Quartets. It had a big Greek population, a big English population, big Jewish population, big Christian population. Lawrence Durrell went back a few decades after. It's all gone. It's just Islam now. Islam chased everything else out. And the phrase I use in the book is Islam is king on a field of corpses. And we see that in Alexandria. We see that in Baghdad, where absolutely disgracefully the Christian population has been chased out of Baghdad basically on America's watch. We see that in Afghanistan, where the last Christian church was razed to the ground on America's watch. We see it now in the territory controlled by the Islamic State, which is destroying some of the oldest shrines and monuments in Christendom. And that is the problem. Islam is king on a field of corpses. Islam has a problem with pluralism. Pluralism is difficult for Islam. Doesn't matter whether it's Jews in the so-called Palestinian territories, or Christians in Nigeria, or Hindus in Kashmir, or Buddhists in southern Thailand, or stoner Australian backpackers in Bali. Islam has a problem with pluralism, with the other.
Let's talk a little about what you mentioned earlier, America's watch, because I agree with your analysis completely. And it's got worse and not better. That is what is so profoundly depressing. It's not as though this is a temporary blip, it'll all be okay. It's getting worse consistently. But as much as I love the United States, and as much as I know Saddam was a monster, he did not embrace Islamism. Christians were, they weren't always treated properly, but they were pretty much protected. It was divide and rule, I know that. But he did have a view, I believe, of Iraq as containing more than just Islam. Assad in Syria and his father, and certainly his grandfather, had the same view. They all seem to be enemies of the United States now. And the people the US is sort of allied with, even in a clumsy way, are those who would destroy any vestige of pluralism.
Well, I think you're right about Saddam's Iraq, that it was a kind of equal opportunity dictatorship. His vice president was a Christian, Tariq Aziz. Historically, you need something quite strong to hold the thumb down on Islam. The Soviet Union did it in the Central Asian stands. I was there just shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union. They were some of the most relaxed Muslims on the planet. They all sort of 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they'd all start drinking this rather sickly sweet liquor and spend the rest of the evening in a very mellow mood rather than jumping up and down shouting death to the great Satan. It was the same in Bosnia as part of the old Yugoslav Federation. It's the same in Indonesia under the dictatorship. If you want a slightly less revolting model of what it takes to hold Islam down, the British Raj did it rather effectively in the Indian Empire. But America basically is not comfortable, I think, in actually exporting culture. So you have a superpower that gets into the nation-building business that it really isn't interested in building nations in its own image. And I don't know why. And I mean, I say that I'm a 19th century imperialist, a century past my sell-by date. But we should all be grateful that the British built India in their own image, compared to, say, what's happened in Afghanistan and Iraq, where it's all about security, it's all about equipment, it's all about technology, but there's no thought as to kind of influencing Iraqis or Afghans on the kind of constitution they're going to put in place.
There was a time when conservatives, and the theme of this show is conservative books and authors, and conservatives did look to the United States. They thought it was pretty good in the US, and if it really happened, maybe they'd try to emigrate there. Perhaps it was a rather utopian and misleading vision. But is there any country today, in terms of its minority population, its civil rights and freedom, is there any country that's getting it right or doing better than others?
Well, you know, I think they call Australia the lucky country, and it is in a sense, in that it's an island continent. But they have an immigration policy that they mean and that attracts the best and most highly skilled immigrants in the world. And they do a pretty good job of sealing off their borders to everybody else, the people they don't want. What you have in America, which is a strange problem to me, again, it's a theme of the book, which is this hyper-regulatory bureaucracy. You have the insanity. As the southern border with Mexico is dissolved, and anyone who can get there and get on a flat-bottom skiff and get across the Rio Grande can access benefits and free education and free healthcare and all the rest of it. At the northern border with Canada, you have ever more insane micro-regulations. I write in the book about my kids getting hauled aside at Easter because they had Kinder eggs, which are perfectly legal, as any Canadian child watching knows, are perfectly legal in Canada, perfectly legal in most parts of the world, but are banned in America. If you play in a bagpipe festival in Montreal with your grandfather's bagpipe, your U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife will haul you over the border and fine you $600, the cost of bringing that bagpipe back to the United States. And I think that kind of it's not, obviously, you know, I mean, I'm winging it here. I don't know whether Hitler had a policy on bagpipes. I don't know whether he had a bagpipe fining regime. He was a big picture kind of guy for the most part. But at a certain level, micro-tyranny, if you're not free to take your bagpipe to a bagpipe festival in Montreal, if you're not free to reach your own determination as to whether it's safe for you to enjoy a Kinder egg, a lot of these micro-tyrannies cumulatively add up to quite a burden on a free-born person, I would say.
Yeah. Well, I've said it before, I'll say it again, that they'll take my Kinder egg or my bagpipes from my cold, dead hands. The book is very funny as well as very important and beautifully written. Mark, as always, it's a great pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Merry Christmas.